The mountains held their breath that evening, the sun falling in slanted streaks of copper light across the pines. Evelyn Hart sat in the back of the stagecoach with her veil folded into her lap, though the fabric was more dust than white now. She had ridden for days, leaving behind a past she would not speak of and heading toward a future she had not yet seen. Her heart thumped against the ribs of her corset with the rhythm of a frightened bird. Every jolt of the wheels over stone made her fingers tighten, her knuckles pale. She told herself she was brave, that a woman could fashion a new life out of the wilderness if she dared. But courage is thin when hunger and loneliness gnaw at the bones. When the gunfire split the silence, it was as if the earth itself cracked open. Horses screamed, the driver shouted, and the coach lurched sideways. Shadows darted from the tree line, men with ragged coats and faces carved hard by lawless years. Bandits, hungry for coin or blood, it mattered little which. Evelyn's breath tore from her lungs. She pressed herself against the wall of the coach, feeling her throat close as a revolver muzzle shoved through the window. The stink of sweat and powder filled the air. And then came another sound, deep booming, steady as thunder rolling down from the peaks. A rifle spoke from the ridgeline. One of the bandits dropped where he stood. The others turned, snarling like wolves, but the mountain man did not miss. He came crashing through the timber, broad-shouldered, hair dark and tangled, his coat patched but his hands sure. Evelyn saw the fire leap from his barrel again, and another man fell. The fight was brutal, quick as a heartbeat, and yet it stretched into eternity for her. She clutched the frame of the coach until splinters buried themselves in her skin. One of the bandits, desperate, swung his pistol toward her. Before the shot cracked, the mountain man's body slammed into hers, knocking her down into the dust. She felt the hot rush of his blood as the bullet caught him instead. He grunted, staggering, but did not fall. He pulled her behind him, shielding her with his bulk, and fired again until survivors fled into the trees. When the silence returned, it was heavy, as though the mountain itself had grown weary of violence. Evelyn pushed herself up on trembling arms, eyes wide, breath shallow. The man stood swaying, blood dripping from his side into the dirt. He turned his face toward her, lined with years of weather and sorrow. His eyes were the color of ash after fire, gray, quiet, holding something buried too deep to name. "You best keep riding," he said, voice low, raw as gravel. "You don't owe me a thing." Evelyn's throat burned. She looked at the wound, the crimson soaking his shirt, and something in her refused to leave. "If I ride on, you'll die here," she whispered, her hands already fumbling for a strip of cloth. He tried to push her away, but the strength drained from him too quickly. On her knees in the dirt, she pressed fabric against his wound, her fingers slick with blood. He flinched, but he did not stop her. For the first time since she fled her old life, Evelyn felt steady, terrified, yes, but steady, as though the act of saving another might save something inside her too. They moved together slowly through the trees, his arm heavy across her shoulders, his weight threatening to pull her down. The light dwindled into a blue haze, the wilderness growing colder, sharper. Every step was a battle, every breath shallow with pain. She did not ask where he was taking her. She only knew that he walked with purpose, and that purpose carried her along. When the cabin appeared at last, it rose plain and unadorned against the pines, smoke curling faintly from a chimney. Two boys stood in the doorway, barefoot and silent, eyes sharp with suspicion. One was tall for his age, perhaps 11, jaw tight with the need to be older than he was. The other was younger, 7 at most, his hair in tangles, his gaze softer but no less watchful. The wounded man leaned heavier against her as they approached. His voice, hoarse, broke the silence. "Boys," he said, "this is Evelyn." They said nothing. Their eyes slid over her like she was another storm rolling in, one they did not yet trust. Evelyn's hand shook as she eased him toward the cabin, but she met the children's eyes with a quiet strength she did not know she carried. In that moment, she understood she had stumbled not only into a stranger's home, but into a wound, one carved long before she ever arrived, raw and aching in the shape of motherless sons and a man who had forgotten how to lean on anyone. And still, she did not turn away. Snow came early that year, as though the mountain wished to trap them together and see what they would do with one another. The first flakes drifted down while Jonah split logs out back, his movement slower than before, his side still stiff with healing. Evelyn watched in the doorway, shawl wrapped tight, her breath rising pale in the cold air. She had meant to leave once he could stand on his own, but the storm changed her plans. The trail was gone beneath the drifts, and survival tethered her to this cabin whether the man or his sons wanted her there or not. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, pine resin, and the faint sweetness of cornmeal bread. Evelyn fumbled with tasks she had never known before, grinding kernels between stone until her arms ached, fetching water from a frozen creek, the metal bucket biting her hands numb. Her skirt snagged on brambles, her boots soaked through. Caleb, the elder boy, watched through a hard smirk, as if every clumsy mistake proved what he already suspected, that she was a useless burden. Eli, smaller, shadowed her steps with quiet curiosity. When she bent to untangle a bird caught in one of their snares, the boy's face lit up as though she'd pulled magic from the air. The days folded into one another, gray and white, the sound of wind whistling through the chinks in the cabin walls. Evelyn stitched what she could, mended torn shirts, cooked stews that were too thin but warm enough to hold them through the long nights. Jonah said little. His presence felt more than heard. The weight of boots by the door, the scrape of an axe outside, the low rumble of his cough by the fire. He left her to the boys, as if he feared speaking might bind him to her in ways he was not ready to be bound. But she heard the neighbors' whispers when she followed Jonah once to the trading post. Women in faded calico, men with eyes that measured more than they welcomed, their voices cut sharp as knives. Already moving with him, has she? Poor man, taking it astray. She pretended not to hear, but their words dug deep, sharper than the mountain wind. That night she sat alone at the cabin's table after the boys had gone to bed, staring at her hands folded in her lap, shame pressing down like another snowfall. Jonah came in late, shoulders rimmed with frost, and saw the uneaten food she had left for him. He said nothing, only sat down and ate in silence. Yet when she rose to leave, she found her torn shawl laid across the back of her chair, stitched where it had ripped. His work, his way of answering gossip was something wordless but steady. Quiet gestures stitched themselves between them. She left stew simmering for him when she knew he would be late. He brought in firewood and stacked it by the hearth without being asked. One evening he placed a rifle in her hands, rough wood against her palms. "You'll need to know," he said, voice low, no softness, only necessity. His hands covered hers, guiding her aim toward the tree-lean. For a moment the distance between them shrank, and she felt steadier than she ever had. The boys shifted too. Caleb, guarded, began to linger near her lamp at night. She caught him staring at the pages of the Bible she read, though his lips moved as if the letters themselves resisted him. When she offered to teach him, he shrugged, pretended not to care, but he stayed. Soon his finger traced words beneath the glow of tallow candles, his pride hidden but his eyes brighter. "Eli," tender-hearted. One slipped and called her "my Dawn," his voice soft as the falling snow. The word hung in the air between them. He blushed, turned, and ran outside before she could speak. Evelyn's breath caught in her chest. She did not correct him, though the ache of it filled her throat. Jonah heard it too. He paused at the door, his jaw set hard, the firelight catching the sorrow etched deep in his face. He said nothing, but that night when he passed by Evelyn at the hearth, his shoulder brushed hers ever so lightly, as though some unspoken weight had shifted. The snow deepened. The nights grew long, but within the walls of that rough-hewn cabin something else was forming, fragile as the ice crystals on the window panes, yet warmer than any fire. They were not family, not yet, but some bond beyond strangers had begun to take root, quiet as roots spreading under frozen ground, waiting for thaw. The storm broke not with thunder, but with the crunch of hooves in the snow and the low murmur of men circling the cabin. Evelyn woke first. Something in her had learned to hear danger before it spoke. She touched Jonah's arm where he slept near the hearth, and his eyes opened at once, pale gray, already knowing. He reached for the rifle propped against the wall. Through the cracks in the shutter she saw them. The bandits who had shattered her world on the road weeks ago. their silhouettes shifting like wolves in the dark. She recognized the leader, a scar dragging his mouth into a permanent sneer. They had followed, patient as hunger, waiting for weakness. Jonah's voice was iron. "Take the boys. Out the back." But Evelyn shook her head. "I've run enough." Her words were a whisper, yet they held the weight of stone. The first gunshot tore through the stillness. The cabin shuddered as it splintered. Jonah fired back, his body moving with grim resolve, but there were too many. Caleb clutched Eli to him, wide-eyed, trembling. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside them, steadying her voice as she whispered, "Bar the door. Keep the fire low." She pressed her hands against the wood, as if she could hold back the night itself. Another shot rang, and Jonah staggered, grazing fire across his shoulder. Evelyn's chest seized with fear. She saw one bandit slipping close along the sidewall, rifle raised for Jonah's blind spot. Her hands shook as she reached for the weapon Jonah had taught her to use, though it felt alive under her fingers. Breath ragged, she lifted it, aimed through the narrow crack, and pulled the trigger. The man fell, his cries swallowed by the snow. Evelyn's body jolted with the recoil, her ears ringing. For a heartbeat she could not breathe. Then Jonah's eyes found hers across the smoke, something fierce and unspoken passing between them. Not gratitude. Something deeper, something that recognized her as more than the frightened woman from the stagecoach. The boys joined the battle in their small way. Caleb fetched ammunition, his face set with a man's determination, though his voice cracked when he shouted. Eli clung to her skirt but brought water, holding it up to Jonah when he paused to reload. They fought not as strangers, but as something closer to a family, each thread woven tighter by the fire of survival. At last, with their numbers cut and the mountain refusing to yield them shelter, the bandits fled into the trees, curses trailing behind them like smoke. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of wind through the pines and the ragged breaths inside the cabin. The air reeked of powder, of sweat, of fear burned into something fiercer. Jonah leaned against the wall, blood dark against his shirt, but still standing. Evelyn crossed to him, her hands trembling not with fear this time, but with resolve. She pressed cloth to his wound, her face close to his. He did not push her away. His hand, rough and scarred, lifted to hers and held it there, steady. When dawn came, it was not gentle. It spilled over mountains in a blaze of gold, turning every shard of ice into fire. The light touched Jonah's face, lined and weary, and for the first time he let the silence between them soften. His hand remained on hers, no word spoken, but none needed. Caleb leaned against the hearth, his eyelids heavy but proud. Eli, half asleep, nestled into Evelyn's side. In a voice no louder than the morning wind, he whispered the word again, "Ma." This time there was no shame in it, no fleeing. Caleb did not correct him. Jonah did not turn away. Evelyn closed her eyes, her heart swelling with a strange ache that was not sorrow this time, but something stronger. She wrapped her arm around the boy, holding him as though she had always been meant to. The mountain had tested them with fire and night, but the dawn had given them something in return. And if you had been there, standing in the snow outside that cabin, you might have seen it too, that sometimes family is not a matter of blood or vow, but of strangers who chose not to let go of one another when the world gave them reason to. You might have felt it, the truth the mountain whispered that morning. Salvation does not always ride in with banners and songs. Sometimes it comes as a weary man, a woman who refused to run, and children who at last found the courage to call her Ma at dawn.